Join ForumIAS Academy, trusted by hundreds of toppers, including IAS Rank 1 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐧𝐧𝐞𝐥 Sharma.
Hello friends, good evening. This is Vijay. In our today's news discussion, we are going to discuss these 5 topics in the slide. The first topic is related to the ASEAN. It came in the editorial section. Persistence with dialogue on a trodden path. So this is the article title. Secondly, we are having an article related to the disaster. A big step in reducing the disaster. This is the second article. Thirdly, we are having an article related to the gig workers. The Rajasthan government, they finally passed the bill which related to the gig workers. So this is the third article, and Rajasthan is the first government to pass the bill with related to the gig workers, right? Then fourthly, we are having an article related to the PSLV C56. So ISRO to launch PSLV C56, and ISRO, it is scheduled to launch the PSLV C56 on coming July 30th, right? So this is the fourth article we are having. Then lastly, I had taken up an article related to the Kharif season. Kharif showing towns around to rise 1.2% amid excess rain. So this is the last article. Primarily this article will be helpful for the aspirants who are preparing for their first attempt, right? So I found there is a scarcity in today's Hindu. That's what I handpicked, only these 5 articles. And now without any further delay, let us dive on to the discussion part. This is the first article, guys. ASEAN, persistence with dialogue on a trodden path. This is the article title. Raju Bhatia is the author of the article, and he is a former ambassador. Throughout the article, the author have been discussing only about 2 issues. One is related to the Myanmar crisis, and the next one is related to the emergence of China. So these are the 2 factors the author have been discussing throughout the article, and he have been showing some limelight upon the India's interest in the ASEAN region, right? And before getting into the article, we need to know some basics related to the ASEAN, right? So ASEAN as a security and military organization, it came into the existence in the year of 1967. So in the year of 1967, it came into existence through Bangkok Declaration. So the initial 5 partner countries are Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, then Thailand, right? So these are the 5 partner countries. They actually formulated the ASEAN in the year of 1967 through Bangkok Declaration. And with respect to India, since 1991, we are having look east policy, right? We are having look east policy since 1991, and in the year of 1915, we formulated act east policy. With respect to India and ASEAN, both these countries, they are looking up for free, fair and rule-based order in the Indo-Pacific region, right? And here is a cooperation between India and ASEAN. With respect to India, ASEAN is India's 4th largest trading partner. So with respect to the economic domain, in the year of 2009, we both signed FTA in goods, okay? Then in the year of 2014, we also concluded another one FTA in services. So right now we are having free trade agreement both in goods and services between India and ASEAN. Then ASEAN and India, they have also adopted a joint statement announcing the elevation of existing strategic to comprehensive partnership. So with respect to ASEAN, India is having a comprehensive partnership. Then thirdly is about the peace and security. So with respect to peace and security, both ASEAN and India, they are striving for peace, tranquility and stability in the maritime region of Indo-Pacific, right? And with respect to the peace and security, there are 3 initiatives are there. The first one is related to the conclusion of the deal with the Philippines. So recently, India concluded the deal with Philippines for exporting the BrahMos supersonic cruise missile. Secondly, with respect to Singapore, we are having SIMBEX. So it is a maritime bilateral exercise between India and Singapore. Then thirdly, we are having logistics agreement with Singapore to access the Changi port. So right now, Indian vessels, they are having access to the Changi port. Meanwhile, Singapore military personnel, they can take training from Indian bases, because we all well known Singapore is a very small city, right? So they are having huge space crunch for providing the training to the military personnel. So that's what India have been provided access to the Singapore military personnel to undergo training in Indian bases. Then thirdly, with respect to the financial assistance, India provides financial assistance to the ASEAN nations through various mechanisms like ASEAN India Cooperation Fund and ASEAN India Green Fund. This Green Fund, the partners in both the countries, they have been utilizing the funding under the ASEAN India Green Fund for creating the disruptive technologies and climate neutral technologies. Then with respect to the ASEAN India Cooperation Fund, this fund have been utilizing for promoting the trade between ASEAN and India. Then apart from that, with respect to FDI, most of the countries in the ASEAN region, they are a donor for India, especially Singapore. So I think Singapore is the second largest FDI provider to India. Then with respect to the connectivity, India has been undertaking several connectivity projects like IMT highway, then Kaladan multimodal project. So if China is conquering the Siliguri corridor during the wartime, means in that scenario, we will be having access to the northeastern landscape through the IMT highway and the Kaladan multimodal project. So these two projects are strategic projects, and here India have been seeking the help from ASEAN to integrate the northeastern region with the mainland India, right? And with respect to the article, there are two issues are there. Okay, there are two issues the author have been discussing throughout the article, because recently the ASEAN, they concluded their 56th Foreign Ministers meeting. So 56th Foreign Ministers meeting, it was concluded in Jakarta. Then post-ministerial conference also held. There actually the countries had witnessed several developments. The one is related to the Myanmar crisis. So we all well know, since 2021, there was a political turmoil have been going on in the Myanmar. And with respect to the Myanmar, the military regime, they had taken over the democratic apparatus, what it prevailed in the Myanmar, right? Then the Thailand, they also indirectly supporting Myanmar. And already Thailand is also suffering from the internal differences between the royal family and the pro-democratic people. Meanwhile, in this scenario, China is also backing the military regime in Myanmar indirectly, because all these countries, they are having a shared ethnic identity, right? With respect to this issue, in the year of 2021 itself, ASEAN came up with 5-point consensus. So under the 5-point consensus, ASEAN asking Myanmar to take several measures, like the military regime, they need to impose the ceasefires. Then they need to rescue the people who are in the firing ranges. Then they are not supposed to carry out any ethnic cleansing. Then they are not supposed to kill any civilians unwantedly. Like that, several provisions were drawn under the ASEAN 5-point consensus agreement. But it hadn't been implemented because of the differences among the members of the ASEAN. As I already told you, Thailand have been indirectly backing the Myanmar. But Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, they have been taking a neutral stand, because these three countries, they have been receiving excess forex reserve because of the Chinese tourisms. Chinese people, they have been visiting these countries and they have been acting as a forex contributor for these three countries. Apart from that, these three countries, they are depending upon the goods from the Chinese landscape. So it makes these three countries to take a neutral stand with respect to the issue. Then we are having Philippines, Brunei, Vietnam, right? So these three countries, they are having several skirmishes with Chinese government, because by imposing the 9-dash line, Chinese government, they have been occupying all the islands in the South China Sea. With respect to Philippines, they are having issues with respect to the Scarborough Shoal, and with respect to Vietnam, Paracel Island and Spratly Islands are there. So these two islands, it have been asking by the Chinese government. With respect to the Paracel Island, Vietnam, it actually sanctioned one deal to the ONGC Videshi Limited. Right now, ONGC Videshi Limited, they have been exploring the oil in the South China Sea. So it's all because of the conclusion of the deal between Vietnam and India. So India is also having enormous economic and political interest in the South China Sea, right? Then almost 3 countries in the region. One is Cambodia, and another one is Laos, and another one is Myanmar. These 3 countries, they have been depending upon everything upon China for FDI, for goods, for technology. So for everything, these 3 countries, they have been depending upon China, right? Moreover, US is also influencing the region, and it have been creating huge rift among the members of the region. That's how the ASEAN is becoming highly fragile. So the emergence of China and the influence of US, both these 2 factors have been enlarging the rift among the member countries in the ASEAN landscape. So this is what the author have been discussing. In this context, ASEAN, they came up with ASEAN Outlook for the Indo-Pacific, in which they shortlisted several protocols they need to imbibe. The first one is related to the maritime cooperation. So member countries, they have been asking for greater maritime cooperation and greater logistics and economic cooperation. And they are also having focus to achieve the SDG, which means Sustainable Development Goals, by 2030. These all goals have been aligning with Indo-Pacific Initiative of India, right? But to achieve the goals, what they have been envisioned under the ASEAN Outlook, they need to unite. But we need to wait and watch, because the ASEAN have been becoming highly fragile because of the influence of China and the US, right? Therefore, we need to wait and watch how the situation have been going to turn, and India need to recalibrate the measures according to the twists and turns in the ASEAN landscape, right? Now with this note, let us move on to the next article. This is the second article, a big step in reducing the risk of disasters. So here in this article, they have been discussing about the early warning system and the disaster risk. And the author of the articles are Mami Mizutri and Kamal Kishore. So with respect to this article, we need to know some historical facts related to the disaster risk management. Previously, we were having IAGO framework for disaster management. Then in the year of 2015, we actually adopted Sendai framework under the UN. The Sendai framework, it was adopted in Japan. So the city name Sendai was given to this framework, right? So under the Sendai framework, we are having 4 targets. First, we need to understand the risk. Then we need to strengthen the risk governance. For that, we need to make investment, right? So that is the third target. Then we need to enhance the disaster preparedness from the investment. So these are all the 4 targets they envisioned under the Sendai framework. And with respect to Sendai framework, the UPSC had asked questions twice, one in 2016 and another one in 2018, I think. So here in this article, they have been discussing about the climate related disasters. With respect to Canada and Greece, they have been witnessing the forest fires and heat waves. And in India, we have been witnessing the floods in North Indian states and the surge in Yamuna, right? So this is how the situations have been prevailing. And moreover, in this context, the G20 in India, it happened, right? In G20, it established the first G20 disaster risk reduction working group. So with respect to G20, they are having 80% GDP and they are having 2/3 of the global population. So whatever the decisions, whatever the economic decisions they are going to taken in G20, it will be having ramifications throughout the globe, right? So in this context, India proposed the disaster risk reduction working group in G20, right? Now we need to understand what is meant by disaster risk. So here in the image, you can see we are having hazards, then we are having vulnerability, then we are having exposure. So hazards means nothing, it is a potential. So what is the potential prevailing in the region? With respect to India, in the Himalayan region, they are having potential for earthquake, right? So this is the hazard what we are having in the Himalayan regions. Secondly, we are having vulnerability, right? Vulnerability means weakness. If we don't have infrastructure which is resilient for earthquake means, then it will be considered as a vulnerability. Moreover, if we are taking adaptive mechanisms in place means, then the vulnerability will be reduced, okay? Exposure means the amount of population or space which is getting exposed to the hazard. In the sense, if we are taking the east coast plain means, it is having high exposure to cyclones, right? So that is the exposure. Then in certain populated districts, they will be highly prone to the volcanoes or earthquake. Example, we can take Delhi. Delhi is located in a seismic zone, right? So it is having high exposure towards the hazards. So with respect to hazard, we can't reduce. But with respect to vulnerability and exposure, we can reduce, right? So if we are reducing the exposure and vulnerability by imbibing the mitigation and adaptation mechanisms means, then we will be reducing the risk. Obviously, the disaster and the related impacts and all will be reduced. So this is what the article have been discussing. And they actually stated about the early warning systems and their importance. And with respect to the early warning system, the expanding disaster early warning and early action systems is a top priority. So this is what they have been stating. Because once if we are having early warning systems and the real-time alert means, we will be reducing the impact of the disasters. Let's say if we are having, in India, we are having ensemble prediction system. So with respect to ensemble prediction system, we can clearly capture the weather pattern for next 15 days. So with the help of ensemble prediction system, we are actually reducing the risk, right? So that's what the author also discussing, that we need to bring lot of disruptive technologies to leapfrog the disaster related governance in the country, right? So this is what the third point. The promise of disruptive technologies can help many countries leapfrog into a regime where they can use global capacity for forecasting to meet local needs. So in this context, UN recently announced that the UN's early warning for all initiative will be rolled out by 2027. So in 2027, we will be having early warning system for several disasters. So this is the UN statement. Then lastly, enhancing the resilience of infrastructure to withstand climate and disaster risk is another global priority. In most of the cases, the critical infrastructure are getting devastated because of the hazards, right? So they need to be resilient. So this is the another one priority. So these are all the things it had been given in the article. Now with respect to the reduction in disaster risk, we need to focus more on the adaptive and mitigation mechanisms. For that, we need to bring more and more disruptive technologies and climate neutral technologies. So this is what the entire article have been discussing. Now with respect to this article, we need to know the cycle. So disaster management cycle. So if there is a disaster means the response should be there and it should be immediate. Then there is a phase called rehabilitation and recovery, and we can reduce the rehabilitation and recovery time by adapting the mitigation and adaptive techniques, right? So in the post-disaster scenario, in most cases, we will be coming to know about the factual information about the disaster, what it happened. With the help of those factual informations, we actually can do refinement in mitigation plans. Then the disaster preparedness will be enhanced. So in future, if any disaster is going to occur in the same pattern means, then we can eliminate the risk from that disaster, right? So this is what throughout the article, both the authors have been discussing. Now let us wind up this article here. Let us move on to the third article. So this is the third article, guys. What does India's first gig workers right bill stipulate? So we all well known, the Rajasthan government, they passed the welfare law for gig workers, and the bill name is Gig Workers Registration and Welfare Bill. With respect to this article, we need to know some 5 points. That's it. Okay. So there is no need to take any notes from this article. Just the highlighted portion is enough for your preparation. So what did the bill propose? Bill actually introduced some new terms. The first one is aggregators. These aggregators are referred as the digital giants like Swiggy, Zomato and all. So these platforms, they are designated as aggregators because they are connecting the buyers and sellers, right? Then they actually introduced a term related to the primary employers. Who are primary employers? Apart from these digital giants, some agencies, they will be reaping the potential of gig workers, right? So they will be termed as primary employers. Then under the act, under the Gig Workers Registration and Welfare Act, they proposed one funding mechanism, Social Security and Welfare Fund. This is the funding mechanism they proposed under the act. So here the contributions will be made by the individual workers, state government and other sources. In the sense, they are actually proposing welfare cess. So the welfare cess will be levied in each and every transaction, and it will be collected in the funding mechanism, and those fundings will be used for the welfare related to the gig workers. So this is what they proposed, and the welfare cess will be between 2%, maximum 2% they proposed, and it will be in the range of 1% to 2%, right? So this is related to the welfare cess and the social security and welfare fund. And with respect to the workers' rights, this bill, it states that whenever the employee he registered with the platform, he is becoming a gig employee, right? So from that situation onwards, the rights what the bill had been envisioned will be applicable to the concerned gig worker. So this is what it had been stated here. Right now, the gig economy have been covered on the basis of Code on Social Security. But from now onwards, it will be replaced by the gig workers registration and welfare bill, right? So this is what they had given here. From the Social Security and Welfare Fund, they will provide aid to health insurance, then other benefits related to the health, accident and education. So these stuffs and all will be covered in the Social Security and Welfare Fund mechanism. Then what about workers' grievances? Each and every gig worker, they are having an opportunity to be heard for grievances, right? They can appear physically before the officer, or they can register the complaint through the portal. The employer, they are also having a right to object the complaint within 90 days before the appellate authority. So this is what they have been discussing in this portion. So both the employee and the employer, they are having a right to complaint and object the complaints, okay? The employee is having right to file the complaint, and the employer is having right to object the complaint before the appellate authority, right? Then are aggregators held accountable? Here in this portion, they have been stating that each and every aggregator, they need to deposit the welfare cess on time, and each and every month they need to update their database, because each and every month people will be joining and some people will be leaving from the platform. That's what they need to update the database each and every month. So if they are violating any of these aspects, means initially there will be a imposition of fine of 5 lakhs. Then for repetition of violences, there will be a further imposition of fine up to 50 lakhs. So it has been prescribed under the Gig Workers Registration and Welfare Act. Okay. So these are the 5 points you need to know with respect to this bill. And if any question, if it is coming related to the gig workers, means you can add these points and you can showcase Rajasthan as a case study, right? Now with this note, let us move on to the next article. This is the 4th article, guys. ISRO to launch PSLV C56 carrying Singapore's new imaging satellite, right? So on coming July 30th, ISRO will be launching PSLV C56. It will be placing the Singapore-based DSSAR, which means synthetic aperture radar, in the lower Earth orbit. So the satellite will be placed in the lower Earth orbit. Normally in the lower Earth orbit, we will be placing the imaginary satellites or the radar satellites. So it is a radar imaging. So it will be placed in the lower Earth orbit. Normally the lower Earth orbit is in the range of 500 to 1800 kilometer. Okay, this is the range of lower Earth orbit. Above that we are having geosynchronous transfer orbit. It is in the range of 37,000 kilometer above Earth's surface. Okay, and the PSLV C56, it will be functioning in core alone mode. What is meant by core alone mode? The liquid second stage and the solid third stage and the liquid fourth stage will be there. But the initial stage, in the first stage, we will be having 6 strap-on boosters, right? Those 6 strap-on boosters, it will not be there in the PSLV C56. In C55 also, we launched almost in the same pattern because the weight is very low. That's what the propellants, everything is very costly, right? That's what the ISRO have been reducing it to core alone mode. And all the purposes related to the commercial launches have been handling by the Antrix Corporation, which is a commercial arm of ISRO. Then with respect to DSSAR, in India, we are having a R1 satellite RISAT. So RISAT is Indian variant of DSSAR. RISAT is popularly called as Eye on the Sky because RISAT is also a reconnaissance satellite. That's what it is popularly termed as Eye on the Sky. Now with respect to this article, we need to know some basics of the PSLV variant. PSLV, it is a third generation launch vehicle, actually I had taken this from the ISRO page, and they actually had given some brief about the PSLV, but we need to know it is a third generation launch vehicle, and in India we are having SLV, PSLV and GSLV, and we actually launched Chandrayaan mission with the help of GSLV Mark III, right? It is the heavy lift launch vehicle of ISRO. With respect to PSLV, it consists of 4 stages. The first stage is solid, then the second stage is composed of a liquid stage where Vikas engine have been using. Then third stage we are having a solid rocket motor. Then in the fourth stage also it is a liquid stage where we are using a cryogenic engines. And in the cryogenic engines we are using hydrogen as a fuel. And with respect to the core on mode, we will be eliminating the first stage, and there will be some lower propellant in the second, third and fourth stages, because the liftoff, the payload weight is only 360 kg, right? So that's what we are eliminating the first stage to save the cost on further launches, right? Now with this note, let us move on to the next article. This is the last article, guys. Kharif sowing turns around to rise 1.2% amid excess rain. So this is what they had given. So before 10 days, they were stated that there will be a 2% deficit in the sowing area compared to the last year data. But now they had shown that 1.2% increase had been witnessed in the past 10 to 15 days. So this is what they have been providing in the article, and with respect to the Kharif, they have been stating about the area of sowing for each and every crop and their expansion. These are all the facts they had given in the article, but I would say it is not needed from the perspective of exam. From the perspective of exam, we need to know what is meant by Kharif and what are the Kharif crops and what are the conditions it required for growing the Kharif crops. This is what we needed, right? And Kharif, it cultivated and harvested during the monsoon season, which means it will be sown in the month of June and it will be harvested in the month of November to December. And these Kharif crops, they require high rainfall, high humidity, then high temperature. So the productivity of the Kharif crop, almost 78% it came from the peninsular states, right? And the rest 32% it came from the northeastern states and the states which are adjacent to the northeastern states like Bengal, Bihar and all. And with respect to the Rabi, we are having 36% productivity, and with respect to the Kharif, we are having 60% total productivity. Then with respect to the Zaid, we are having 4% productivity, right? So this is the rough estimate of the productivity in agrarian landscape with respect to India. And with respect to the Kharif crops, rice, maize, cotton, jowar, bajra, moong, urad, groundnut, soybean and sugarcane. So these are all the crops we are growing in the Kharif region. Then with respect to the region, Kharif is growing only in the peninsular states. Okay. Now let us have a brief recap on what we have seen in our today's discussion. In the first article, we had discussed about ASEAN and the crisis in ASEAN apparatus, then what would be the implications upon India. So this is what we had discussed. Then the second article is related to the disaster risk reduction. There we had discussed about the initiatives what India had taken and what is meant by disaster risk and how it can be minimized. Then in the third article, we had discussed about gig workers, right? So the Rajasthan government, they passed a gig workers bill. So regarding that, we have seen the third article. Then in the fourth article is related to the PSLV C56. So it is going to function in the core alone mode. Then lastly, we had discussed about Kharif. So these are the articles we had discussed today. And with respect to today's article, as I already told you, there is a huge scarcity for the articles. That's what I handpicked the articles like Kharif and all for today's discussion. And now let us wind up the discussion here. Let us move on to the question part. So this is the mains question for you. ASEAN's unity foster India's ambitious plans in the Indo-Pacific. Critically examine the issues faced by ASEAN in recent times and its implications in India. Right? So this is the mains question for you, and I hope you can frame the points what I had told to you in today's discussion. And this is the prelims question, and it was asked in 2022. The Gandikota Canyon of South India was created by which one of the following rivers? The Pennar landscape. So the Pennar region, it actually created the Gandikota Canyon in the Kadapa district of Andhra Pradesh. Then this is a term based question. The term Levant, often heard in news, roughly corresponds to which of the following region? So the Levant, this is a region, it have been referring the countries which are present in the eastern Mediterranean shores. So this is the first option, regions along the eastern Mediterranean shores, right? So this is the first option. A is the right one for the question number 2. And with respect to the Levant, we need to know Israel, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, then Palestine. So these are the 5 countries which are located in the Levant region, because in the future prelims and all, they can ask you the countries which are present in the Levant regions. So that's what I am telling it to you again. Israel, Palestine, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon. So these 5 countries, they are located in the Levant landscape. This is the third question for you. Among the agricultural commodities imported by India, which one of the following accounts for the highest imports in terms of value in the last 5 years? So for these questions, you need to go through the economic survey. So in that, they got clearly given that the vegetable oils. So the vegetable oils, it actually accounts for the highest imports in terms of value. So answer option D is the right one for question number 3. Then with respect to the feedback, some students ask for mail ID and all. So that's what I am providing it here. You can share the feedback to hindudailyforumias@gmail.com. Okay. So finally, we are arriving at the end of the discussion. I hope you would like this discussion. Let me catch you in another discussion tomorrow. Thank you for your patience. Bye. Have a nice time.